All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So, today we are going to be talking about fixing the Kuvalich system. The reason for that, because I know the Kuvalich system is kind of an old topic, is because I wrote these notes up a while ago, pre Christmas, and I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about. And while we're waiting for DE to, hopefully come in and make some big changes to Railjack that can make that mode a whole hell of a lot more fun, I figured it was appropriate to go back and discuss this stuff because this is kind of a similar topic of taking this content that they just put out there and is an island by itself and integrating it better into the game. Because I think it's only fair to not really talk about Railjack any further until they at least have time to implement some change to that system. With the Kuvalich system, of course, they have had quite a bit of time, so it's only fair to talk about changes to it. With that, do I think they are going to change the Kuvalich system majorly? No, I don't think DE is going to spend that development time to really actually integrate it into the core loop of Warframe and make it really a part of the game, but I wish they would, so let's talk about it. So, the main problem is that the Lich are completely disconnected from the core gameplay loop of Warframe, and it is really unsatisfying to farm them by themselves for long periods of time because they just don't connect to anything else you're actually doing. So, the goal of these changes would be to integrate liches in an intelligent and rewarding manner for players to engage with regularly, passively, and actively. Being able to do all three of those things, I think, is really important because you want a player to be able to make progress on this system just kind of one way or another, but also be able to actively and very aggressively farm for this thing if that is their goal. I think that is healthy for a system in Warframe. With that, before we really get started with these changes, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments what you think about these changes and if you think they would be a positive influence on the Lich system or what you would change about the Kuvaliches. Maybe it's more simple than I'm making it here. With that, let's get into the kind of steps that I have outlined here. And there are a number of them. So, influence. As I see it currently, influence is in a bad place because influence right now is only these very specific nodes and it's these hyper specific missions that are by themselves. It's another layer of having a full star chart of missions to fill with players and just simply not having enough player interest to do just that. As it stands now, it's been a while since Kuvaliches have come out, and these nodes to go and like get a public matching party to fight your Lich, it's empty. That's just the reality of the situation. Is most of the time it's going to be completely empty, and that's no good. So, ideally, we would like to find more full parties or be able to passively gain this stuff for the Liches. So, I would change influence to cover an entire planet at a time and not just specific nodes on the planet. That would mean that any node you go to on that planet is going to have thralls. And there's a few other changes in here that are important to make it so that all these missions are not just suddenly very high level and you can't avoid it. In addition to that, I think an important part of this is to add a Kuva Bates item or like a Kuva Beacon or whatever they would want to call it in lore. Doesn't really matter. I'm sure we can find some void magic term to call it. And this item would simply force a Lich to invade a certain planet. So if you really want to farm stuff on Jupiter, but your Lich isn't there and you'd really like to get thralls, you could spend a little bit of resources, not very expensive, should not be an expensive item, to force your Lich to invade that zone and you'd be able to get thralls on that planet. I think this would be good and more interactive for you just having the Lich kind of cooperate with you a little more and cooperate with what you're already doing in the game. Basically, this allows players to choose what missions they're doing freely and basically gives you the opportunity to farm for something that's not just the Kuva Lich. If you really want to do deception on like Uranus or whatever, but there's no Lich there, you can now bring that Lich there and then still farm that mission and also get those thralls and make multiple lines of progress in your game at a time, which is really satisfying. On top of that, though, I don't want to take away from the kind of speciality of the special missions that are at a higher level, because I think that's important to the core loop of the Kuva Liches. So I would instead kind of reconfigure what those missions are now and call them deep influence nodes, which would incentivize people to do different missions and not just only the missions they specifically want to do. These would really very simply just be the higher level missions as they are now, except I would change them to make it so that the endless missions do truly go endless. So in your defense, it's 5 waves reward, 5 waves reward. It's not just 5 waves, get the fuck out, and you don't get anything extra on top of it. It's just the regular mission offered at a much higher level, with more aggressive thrall spawns and stuff like that. I think is necessary, really, at the absolute baseline for this system to be better, is for us to actually be able to do some endless farms, because it also gives the Kuvalich an opportunity to actually steal important items from us. If we are farming for a specific relic and our Lich happens to have a deep influence node there, and we like take that deep influence node and our Lich has the opportunity to steal these things from us, we're going to get all these rewards built up, and they're going to have more and be more worth hunting down and killing if they actually have a horde of important items, as opposed to having like 3,000 credits on their person when we finally take them down, because we've done a bunch of missions that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. With that, I think it would be appropriate for your Lich to only be able to appear on these deep influence nodes, because that kind of gives credence to the actual difficulty of the Lich. Your Lich isn't just going to show up on like a level 20 mission you happen to be on, but will show up if you're in an area where they are more in control than just the general control on a given planet. With that, I think it's really vitally important, because obviously we have the Liches and their Grineer. I think Thralls should appear across all nodes on a planet, regardless of if there is a different faction present. Obviously, the tech for this already exists, because Thralls can appear on crossfire missions, so having multiple factions on a mission I don't think is going to make much of a difference. But having those Thralls be in those missions and just be able to spawn in and also like fight Corpus if they're there, because they're obviously not on the same side. Your Lich should be present in some way in all the missions in these sectors, so that they feel more integrated into the world. Like, their Thralls aren't just a thing that you have to go seek out. Their Thralls are in your missions, and you need to kill them to make progress. With that, Thralls would continuously appear in these endless missions. So, of course, DE would probably have to set some kind of cap where it's like, hey, every 5 waves of defense, only this many Thralls can show up or whatever. But you having the opportunity to do those longer missions and get more Thralls if you're willing to go longer in missions, I think is appropriate and gives more credibility to people that like certain game modes. If you're the person that really wants to spend an hour in a survival, I don't think you should be docked for wanting to do that and not get any Thralls. That seems absurd to me. With that, though, there's a balance to this, and I think it would be really important to kind of edit the murmur progress that you're getting from these different levels of Thralls. So, as here, this is of course just a suggestion. A level 0, obviously not level 0, but level 1 to 40 would give about half of the current murmur progress per Thrall that you kill. I think that's only fair for like the regular level of the star chart, to be giving you less than what you'd get from these deep influence nodes generally. And then level 41 to 79 would give you the regular current murmur progress, and level 80 plus enemies would give you a 1.5x multiplier on your murmur progress, so you're rewarded for getting to these higher level missions. 80 being the cutoff is maybe just slightly low. It maybe should be 90, but just a general scheme of having the more difficult missions be more rewarding in terms of murmur progress, because these enemies would, of course, like, theoretically be more powerful and higher rank and have like more information, let's say, I think would be appropriate to reward players for doing that higher level stuff. With that, I would also add yet another special thing on top of this, and this would be the part where it's more so, I think, a lot of new development for DE, and this would be a forward base mission. So these would be special deep influence nodes that you only get whenever the Lich is like level 2 and above. 1 per planet, per Lich level or / battle with your Lich. So if your Lich is at max level, you're still going to get one of these if you try a combination on your Lich and it fails. Basically, this would be a level 100 plus Lich Flood. So we have Kuva Floods, which are of course the harder versions of the Kuva Siphon missions. And this would be essentially an opportunity for you to really go after your Lich, but also get some additional rewards for that and have it be a much higher level mission than you're even getting from your deep influence nodes. So you would have, like, let's say the Pluto forward base. There would be a spy vault there would be a capture target, and there would be 2 excavators. And I think it would be appropriate, depending on how hard DE would want to make this content, to have these things active simultaneously. So, like the excavators, they're going to come down and drop, and you also need to capture the target. Really rewarding building a team and going and doing these things because obviously, if you could just activate the excavators at your will, you could just go do the capture target, do the spy vault, and then just do a very regular excavation mission, which I think is fine if DE wants to make it more accessible for solo players. But having it be like you spawn into the mission, excavator drops like right in front of you in the first room, so that's going on, but also the capture target is on the run. That could be more interesting for actually building a crew and getting people together to go do this stuff. But to reward these people, I think it would be really important to have not only a murmur offering, which I think 10% of your current murmur progress would be reasonable. This would be especially good on the third murmur, where it is a much higher amount of murmurs you need to progress. And also reward some evergreen reward drops. I have 2 listed here. It depends on like the length of the mission that they would introduce, and it could vary from planet to planet depending on what the objectives are on each planet. But including things in a drop table for this, like Forma blueprints, a large cache of credits, short boosters, even stuff you might find in rare crates. Maybe this would be another place to introduce like the Scimitar Avionics, or other rewards that don't have another place in the game, things that you can't get anywhere else, would be pretty good for this type of mission, so people can farm things here and actually really want to go do these missions, and maybe also help their friends do these missions. With that, of course, if this is going to be your Lich's forward base, they would have a very high chance of spawning here. I have given some thought to if your Lich spawns at a forward base, they can't level up or spawn another forward base. You'd have to fight them outside of their base in order to spawn another one for you on another planet. But I think it kind of depends on how you look at it, whether or not chaining forward bases together is a good gameplay loop or not. So I think that's highly up for debate. I'd like to know what your opinions are on that in the comments. And also, they have talked about before on the dev stream the idea that Palladino would be able to get rid of your current Lich once a week. I think is an absolutely excellent idea. Absolutely an incredible idea. Because this essentially makes a Lich worst case scenario weekly content. So for someone who has all of the Lich weapons, but probably not all of the Lich ephemera, the worst case scenario is that you log on, you generate a Lich, and you're like, does it have an ephemera? Yes or no? If it doesn't have an ephemera, okay, I'll get Palladino to get rid of it. If it does have an ephemera, you now have gameplay to go and do. But at the very least, this being a weekly piece of content gets players on the game to come and play, and then maybe they find something else they want to go do. Maybe there's something new they didn't know about because they logged in, stuff like that. That's just good game design for getting players back onto a free-to-play game. I think that's pretty fair to see in general. Now, there is another piece to this that I do want to talk about, and that is making the Requiem mods more of an actual game rather than just Murmur progress being everything that you need to do. So, I have outlined this stuff here, which is how the Requiem mods are going to work. And before we get into this, I do want to talk about how they currently work. So let's look real quick at this. So as we can see on the Parazon, you can equip 3 Requiem mods, and I have these equipped right here, right now. And these have a specific order that you need to kill the Lich in. As it stands currently, if we look at my current Lich, whenever you guess on the Lich, you only guess with the first one. What this ends up doing is making it so that you would need to guess if you, like, I mean, you know, the maximum amount of times you could guess would be for each and every Requiem mod before you get it correct. But that is not really very engaging, and it's so restrictive that it usually ends up being that it's just smarter for you to just figure out all the Requiems and then just guess from that pool of 3, rather than actually trying to figure out what your combination is before the game just tells you what you need to know, and then you very easily guess the right order. With that, I would change how this works pretty minorly, I think, in the grand scheme of things, but in important ways to make it more engaging. So, when you use your Parazon on the Lich, you guess multiple Requiems at a time. And the way this would work would depend on which Requiem you're on and which ones you have right already, because I think there's a way to make this too easy, but the way that I've devised here is kind of splitting the difference on it on making it more reasonable to actually guess without it being far too easy. So, on your first Requiem, you would damage your Lich, and then you'd interact with your Lich, and it will guess with all 3 of your currently equipped Requiems. But if you equipped the correct Requiem in your first slot, it'll do exactly what it does now, which is it will guess it correctly, and then you will continue the fight with your Lich. But if you equipped the wrong one, it will check the other 2 Requiems, and if they are correct, it will show as yellow in the UI. So if we go back to in-game real quick, right here, you see I've got the red one here. So it would obviously be like, no, the red one's not correct. But when you fail this one, it would check these 2. And if either one of them was correct for your first slot, then it would show up as yellow. It wouldn't let you progress through continuing to fight your Lich. Your Lich would still kill you, or perhaps just having the first correct Requiem, like a yellow one in here, would just have you and your Lich be even, and then your Lich would just run away and you wouldn't die. That's also a potential change that I think would maybe be good for the game. But if one of these didn't show up as yellow, none of them are correct, and you can completely equip a brand new set. But if one of them shows up as yellow, that one is the one that goes into the first slot. Then you have a correct first slot, which means on subsequent tries, you then come back to it, and on the second Requiem, you do the same process as above. The first one's right, and then whenever you go to interact the second time, it checks the current second one you have equipped, but if that one's wrong, it will check your final one, and then it'll make it yellow if it is the correct one for your second slot. Essentially, what this means is your first glyph is going to be relatively easy for you to actually figure out that it goes there, because you're going to be able to guess 3 at a time. But after you have that one guessed, you're only going to be able to guess 2 at a time, and on the final one, that's whenever you'd have to guess each and every one of the different available Requiems in order to get it right and complete the sequence. Which I think that scaling in difficulty as you get closer to the end is fine, because if you've got 2 right, that's, I think, motivation personally to get that last one, because you're already so close. And I think that is a just better progression through these, because whenever you've got 3 completely random ones and nothing, it kind of feels shitty. But if you're on that final one and it's like, I just need to guess this one, whenever you hit that shit on the first try or the second try, it's going to feel real good, and you're going to feel like you actually accomplished something, as opposed to the game just telling you what the answer is and you being like, okay, I guess I'll plug it in. Thanks, video game. And that's pretty much the whole spiel. That's pretty much what I think needs to change with Kuvaliches. I think that would better integrate them into the game, as it would just make it so you're able to more freely interact with them. Where I would be able to be like, oh, hey, my Lich is on Lua, and I want to do Apollo because Apollo has really good rewards. I'm also going to get Thralls while I'm there because my Lich is affecting this area. If I want to go to Mars and I want to farm Spear for relics, oh, hey, I'm also going to get progress on my Lich. My Lich is infesting this area. I think it's more immersive and, just makes everything more cohesive with how people are generally going to want to play the game. And then the bait thing would obviously be like, hey, I want to do Jupiter. Maybe I want to do the Ropalo list. I can put bait here and bring my Lich over here. And then when I'm doing the Ropalo list, maybe I'm also getting a few Thralls here and there as I'm doing that mission. I think that, in general, that would really improve the Kuvalich system and just make everybody have a lot more fun with them, because you feel more like you're always making progress if it was done in such a way as to really just integrate it with the game as a whole. But yeah, this is just kind of a random thing that I've been thinking about, because I think the content the DE releases needs to be better integrated into what is already good about the core loop of Warframe, and not be just this separated island content like it's been with Kuvaliches and now Railjack. Yeah, this has been kind of rambly, I know. Apologies for that. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments about my ideas for the Lich system and what you would do instead, and if you agree or disagree with what I would change. But yeah, I will see you guys later.